Hello chess enthusiasts, my name is Miha and welcome to my chessrealm YouTube channel. If you're following chess events, maybe you have come across a Reykjavik Open which recently ended. In the second round there was an interesting battle between international master Irine Sukandar and more famous grandmaster Moke Niemann. A very interesting game, so let's see what happened. Irine Sukandar had white pieces and she started with e4, c5, knight to c3, and we have closed Sicilian. Black plays knight to c6, white plays bishop to b5, black plays g6, and now bishop captures on g6, b pawn recaptures. So what do we have? White has given up on a bishop pair and a tempo in order to obtain a better pawn structure, and we will see who will be better able to exploit his advantages. White plays d3, bishop goes to g7, bishop to e3, attacking defenseless pawn on c5, and black responds with rook to b8, targeting defenseless pawn on b2. Well, let's see, bishop captures on c5, black simply recaptures pawn on b2, and this knight on c3 is under attack. If white removes the knight, let's say, to e2, we have queen to a5, double attack on bishop and king. And of course, if, for example, white tries to defend with queen to d2, again, queen to a5, double attack on this knight on c3, and also attacking bishop on c5. And if, for example, white defends the bishop with d4, again we have queen to a5, let's say queen to d2 defending, and after d6 this bishop is attacked and cannot actually go anywhere, so here white is definitely winning. So in the game, white plays knight from g goes to e2, defending this knight on c3. And black has decided to get rid of these double pawns along the c5, so d5 was played, threatening with d4, forking both bishop and knight. White captures on d5, c-pawn recaptures, and now bishop captures pawn on c5. Of course, black could regain the pawn by capturing pawn on b2, but if rook captures on b2, we have queen to c1 attacking this pawn, rook on b2. Rook has to go back to b7, defending this pawn on e7, because white would definitely play queen to a3, putting a lot of pressure here on this pawn on e7. Let's say after knight to f6, white castles kingside, and after black castles kingside also, we have rook to b1, targeting this rook on b7, who is one of the defenders of this pawn on e7, and also defender of pawn on a7. So things could go very bad for white, for black already in the beginning. So in the game, black has decided to play d4, attacking knight on c3. Knight goes to e4, and now f5, further attacking this knight on f4. Now let's see. The natural square for knight is f3, so maybe knight to g5 later with knight to f3, putting a lot of pressure here on pawn on d4 would be a totally solid option. But in the game, white plays knight go to g3. I won't say it's bad move, but now here is knight is totally immobile because it's blocked by the black pawns, and now black has decided to regain pawn back. So queen to d5 was played, attacking this defenseless pawn on g2, and also attacking bishop on a7. Of course, bishop cannot capture on a7 because then we have queen to a5, working both bishop and king. So here white loses a piece. And if, for example, bishop to a3, well, that would be very passive. So in the game, white has decided to defend this bishop on c5. b4 was played, and now queen captures pawn on g2, attacking rook on h1, which is currently protected by a knight on g3. But at any time, black can try to play f4, attacking knight on g3. Well, f4 square is protected by the knight on e2, but in the game, white plays queen to d2. Now queen protects this f4 square, and knight on e2 is free and can put a lot of pressure here on pawn on d4, who is, by the way, attacked also by the bishop, and also queen protects this pawn on b4, so bishop also threatens by capturing this pawn on a7. So in the game, black plays queen goes back to d5, further defending this pawn on d4, and now white responds by capturing an additional pawn, so bishop captures on a7, attacking the rook, and rook goes to a8. And now white removes the bishop back to c5, and black responds with e5. Now f4 square is additionally protected, so white threatens with f4, attacking the only defender of this rook on h1. Well, let's see. Yeah, white could castle king side, but after bishop to b7, black threatens with mate here on g2, and this cannot be actually defended in any other way other than f3, but then white loses control over this e3 square, and after bishop to h6, black attack this queen on e2 and also regain the control on this e3 square, targeting king on g1, so this would be very bad for white. So in the game, white plays c4, attacking queen on d5. Well, black could try en passant, but black is not interested in that. Maybe the best option would simply be queen to f3, because then pawn on f2 would be blocked and wouldn't be able to move. But in the game, black plays queen to c6, again threatening with bishop to b7, target with the threats here along the long diagonal. And white responds with f4, attacking this pawn on e5, the only defender of this pawn on d4, so white tries to undermine black pawn structure. Black plays bishop to h6. Now this pawn on f4 is pinned by the bishop, so white cannot capture. So white plays rook goes to f1, further reinforcing pawn on f4. Black responds with knight to f6, and now white plays queen to b2. So here white gets this queen out of this pin from the bishop. Well, black has to be careful and cannot simply capture here pawn on f4, because white responds with knight captures on d4, attacking the queen. And after, let's say, queen to d7, we have knight to f5. Queen cannot capture because knight is protected by the knight. And if g pawn recaptures, we have a queen captures on f6, targeting bishop and also the rook. And with these pawns here on the queen side, white is definitely winning here. So in the game, black plays rook goes to b8, and here black prepares a very sneaky trick. Queen can capture bishop on c5, and if b pawn recaptures, rook captures defenseless queen on b2. So white responds with bishop goes to a7, attacking this rook on b8. So rook goes to b7, and now white plays f pawn captures on e5. So white is thinking, okay, you can grab my bishop, but then I'm gonna grab your knight. And indeed, this would be the best option for black, because let's say if rook captures on a7 after e pawn captures knight on f6. Now one of the options is if bishop goes to e3, so cementing this pawn on d4 with a bishop on a3, or maybe even better option if black would simply castle king side. King is safe here, and let's say queen can capture additional pawn, attacking the rook, but after rook to f7, this pawn is going to be captured. White has a lot of pawns here on the queen side who are really intimidating, but black has a bishop pair and king here left in the open, so this would be a very interesting position. Let's say after, I don't know, b5, queen to e6, threatening with the bishop to e3, attacking the queen, and later with the bishop to b7, putting a lot of pressure here along the long diagonal. Well, this indeed would have been a very interesting continuation if it would have happened in the game, but in the game that didn't happen. In the game, black plays knight goes to g4, and now white grabs additional pawn, so bishop captures on d4, and now knight captures on h2. So what do we have? White has here 5 passed pawns versus black has 3 passed pawns. Very interesting position. I must say I haven't seen this in a long time. But rook here on f1 is still attacked by the knight, but before removing, white plays b5, attacking the queen. And maybe for queen the best option would be, let's say, queen to c7, staying here somewhere on the queen side, helping to prevent the progression of a white pawn. But in the game, black plays queen to g2. Rook on f1 is still under attack, so rook goes to f2, attacking the queen. Now you can see here all squares are already taken, and queen cannot go back along the long diagonal, so queen can only go to h3. And now in this position, white is winning, or so the computer says. But one thing is what the computer says, and the other thing is what players think over the board. Indeed, this is a very tricky situation. It's not easy to devise a winning plan, but the winning continuation would be queen to a3. First of all, threatening queen to a8 or queen to c5, somehow trying to invade in the black camp. Well, let's see if black, let's say, tries with knight to g4. We have queen to c5, attacking this bishop on c8. If black tries to defend with rook to b8, we have e6 discover attack on rook on g8. After, let's say, rook to g8, then we would have queen to c6, it's check. King can go to f8 or d8, doesn't matter. Let's say king to d8, queen to d6 check. After king to e8, queen captures rook, and this bishop is also pinned, so this is a winning for white. But you might wonder, hey, what if black tries with bishop to f8, trying to prevent this invasion on the here on the c5? Well, white simply plays queen to a8. Now bishop here is under attack. Let's say that black tries to defend with king to d8. We have e6, again discover attack on the rook. After rook to g8, we have, let's say, bishop to f6 check. Of course, king can run, but let's say bishop goes to e7 defending, then bishop simply capture. Of course, king can capture or rook can capture. Well, let's see, if rook captures on e7, queen to d5 check. After king to e8, we have a queen to c6 check. Again, bishop is also under attack. If black tries to defend with king to d8, we have queen to d6 check. After king to e8, we have queen to b8, and now this bishop in spin that cannot be protected, and here white is winning again. Okay, let's go back to our game. Like I said, it's a very tricky situation, not easy to devise a winning plan in the game. White has decided to play c5, trying to progress with this b and c pawn. Well, here actually white loses additional tempo because black plays knight goes to g4, attacking rook on f2, but white doesn't care. c6 was played, attacking the rook. Rook goes to e7, of course, protecting this e6 square, trying preparing a bishop to e6 because black intends to castle anytime soon. And white has decided to advance with his b pawn, so b6 was played, threatening with b7. And now black castles king side finally. Well, white is still better because of his passed pawn, and the winning play was a simply progress with the b pawn. Let's see if white plays a b7, threatening with b8, promoting to queen. Well, yeah, black could try with knight captures on f2, threatening a knight on d3, forking both king and the queen. So here king would have to capture knight on f2, but after f4, knight is under attack and would have to be removed to e4. But after f3, well, white would have to be very careful. Knight would have to go to g3, protecting this f1 and h1 square, because if white would make a blunder and after knight to g1, then we would have queen to h4 check. The only square for king is f1, but after bishop goes to h3, now white can only capture on h3, and after queen captures on h3, let's say king to f2, queen to g2, king to e1, and after queen to h1, and here we would have perpetual check. But like I said, in this position, white would have to play knight to g3, but again, it's a very tricky situation, lots of combinations, not easy to calculate all this. In the game, however, white doesn't play b7. In the game, white plays queen goes to b3, and it's check. I don't know actually why white played it, because black responds with bishop to e6, and now black gains a very important tempo. Now queen is under attack, so black plays queen goes to white plays queen goes to b4, attacking the rook. Rook goes to e8, and now both rooks are connected, preparing to defend the last rank. Still, b7 was played from the white, and of course white's plan is simple: c7, and later promoting b pawn or maybe even c pawn, doesn't matter. But here black prepares a very sneaky defensive trick: queen goes to h4. Now black is of course threatening by capturing this rook on f2, and later if let's say king captures, black plays f4, this knight would be pinned, so this is a very strong asset for black. But still, in this position, white is winning, and white should have played in this position rook to b1, because now queen on b4 would be protected. Even if black would capture on f2, threatening with capturing pawn on d3, forking both king and queen. Now here white can capture with bishop because queen is protected, and if queen captures on b4, rook simply recaptures, of course threatening c7, later b8. Bishop to d5 doesn't help. After a c7, now black can only sacrifice bishop on c7. After rook captures, of course, yeah, rook can capture on e5, but then white simply play, let's say, e4, rook goes, let's say, to e7, but white plays simple, d5, d6, d7, and so on. Well, let's see. Even after d5, bishop would probably go to f4, knight cannot capture, but here white would simply promote c pawn to queen. And now if black captures queen with rook, now white can capture this bishop on f4. So what we have, white has 3 light pieces versus 1 rook, and this is definitely winning for white. There are many ways to convert this advantage into victory. I cannot go through all the variation, but this is definitely winning for white. Okay, let's go back to our game. So in the game, white doesn't play rook to b1 defending queen on b4. In the game, white plays c7, of course preparing b8 because c8 square is protected by the bishop. And now, of course, black responds with knight captures on f2, threatening knight to d3, forking both the queen and the king. And this is a very difficult position to analyze. Well, white could have saved a draw by playing rook to d1, defending this pawn on d3, because if a knight captures, white can of course promote b pawn to queen, but black would then respond with the f4, pinning this knight on g3. Of course, white can try with bishop to c5, attacking this rook, forcing black to decide what to do with the rooks on the last rank. Of course, rook can capture on b8, but then after c pawn captures on b8, promoting to another queen. And naturally, then black would recapture with rook, and of course, after queen recapture, we have check. Let's say king can go to f7. Of course, white can continue with checking, but let's see, white attack this knight on d1, but knight on g3 is also under attack, and of course, computers say this is equal for both sides. But again, one thing is what the computer says and what the players would play on the board. Definitely very sharp, very tricky position, very hard to analyze. But anyway, rook to d1 defending pawn on d3 would be a saving move for white. But in the game, white makes a fatal blunder and decides to capture this knight. Of course, white cannot capture with bishop because then queen on b4 is for free. So king captures on f2, and this was a fatal blunder. Black plays f4. Well, let's see, if now white would try to promote his b pawn to queen, then black would simply capture knight on g3. It would be a check from rook and pawn. Of course, king cannot go to g2 because queen to h2, it's checkmate. And after king goes to e1, we would have queen to h1 check. d2 square is protected, so white could only defend the check with the bishop to g1, but after a queen to g2, black threatens with rook to f1 with checkmate. So here white could only sacrifice his two queens. After queen to f8, rook captures, again queen captures, bishop captures, c8 square is protected, so white cannot promote, and queen versus rook, this is winning for black. So in the game, white plays rook goes to g1. Now queen to h1 with check is no longer possible, but black plays f-pawn captures on g3 check. Of course, again, king can go to g2 because queen to h2 is checkmate. So in the game, white plays king goes to e1, and now black plays g2, discover attack on the king. Again, d2 square is protected, so king can only go to d1, and now black sets up the last trick, queen to g4, pinning this knight on d1, and white has decided to promote b pawn to queen, so b goes to b8, promoting to queen. And now the end for white king is near. Black plays rook goes to f1 check. Of course, if rook captures, black recaptures with g pawn, promoting to queen. If, for example, let's say king goes to c2, queen to e2 check. If queen to d2 defending, queen to d2 checkmate. If, however, king goes to c3, again queen to d2 checkmate. But white is thinking, okay, I have two queens, so I'm going to sacrifice one queen. So queen goes to e1, defending this check, but now we have mate in 2. I'm sure we will be able to find it. Black plays queen captures, knight on e2 is check. Queen cannot capture because it's pinned by the rook, and if a king captures on e2, it's bishop to g4, it's checkmate. And realizing that all is lost in this position, Irine Sukandar resigned the game. So I hope you like this game, I hope you have learned something from it. If you have any questions, my email is below in the description. Of course, I invite you to visit my Instagram page. That's it for now, and see you soon.